10. Stanislav Reshetniak. Stanislav Reshetniak is the guy who killed his girlfriend on a live stream after his viewers paid him money to beat her up. In the shocking case of live streaming gone wrong, the YouTuber was sent to prison with a sentence of 6 years for directly causing the poor young girl's death. He was convicted of inflicting grievous bodily harm and sent to a Russian penal colony. Here's how it all unfolded. The victim in this situation was 28-year-old Valentina Gregorieva. She was subjected to a lot of abuse at the hands of Stanislav, especially on camera for people to see. He called his girlfriend a prostitute, said she was smelly, and then proceeded to verbally and physically attack her depending on what his watchers paid him to do. While streaming live, he locked her outside the house almost completely naked in sub-zero temperatures. But this was not the cause of her death. When he finally allowed her back inside, it was clear to everyone watching that she was basically dead. When she really did drop dead, someone online called the emergency services. According to the coroner, the actual cause of death wasn't the cold. It was craniocerebral trauma caused by repeated blows to her face. Even though this guy is obviously a complete monster, his mother told reporters that he is actually very kind and would never hurt a kitten. But obviously she didn't know her son very well, seeing as he literally beat his girlfriend to death in front of a live audience. 9. Virginia News Crew Massacre. It was a Wednesday morning when a southwestern Virginia television crew were in the middle of a live broadcast. Everything was totally normal as the journalists did their interview. What nobody realized was that a man standing behind them had a gun in his pocket and that he pulled it out and pointed it directly at them. Moments later, Allison Parker and her cameraman Adam Ward were shot to death in cold blood. The viewers at home were absolutely mortified. The police were able to identify the killer as Vester Lee Flanagan II, a former worker at the TV station. He also managed to clip executive director Vicki Gardner with the local Chamber of Commerce, but Vicki survived and made a full recovery. Broadcasting yourself killing people on TV is a sure way to get caught. Flanagan knew that he would never get out of the situation as a free man, so he took the coward's way out before the police could catch up to him. After all, his face and the murders were broadcast on television screens all across the country, and it was all over social media. Before he went down, Flanagan claimed his motive was racism from the broadcast network. He was upset because they allegedly bullied him. However, Franklin County Sheriff Bill Overton said Flanagan was just, and I quote, disturbed in some way. 8. Desperate Rooftopper. A desperate rooftopper named Wu Yongning was live streaming a daring stunt in an attempt to make some cash for his wedding and to help pay for his mom's hospital bills. Unfortunately for him, the stunt didn't go over very well. The 26-year-old daredevil climbed 62 stories and clung to the edge of a skyscraper while holding a selfie stick and live streaming. This was in November of 2017, but while he was holding on to the side of the skyscraper, he lost his grip and tumbled all the way down to the street below. His body was later discovered by a window cleaner. So far, the disturbing clip of his death has gathered at least 15 million shares. He was lowering himself over the edge of the building to do pull-ups when he fell, as he couldn't lift himself to actually do the pull-up. And to make the story even more tragic, his plan was to propose to his girlfriend the day after the stunt. He figured that because it was so daring, he would make a ton of money and tips from his online viewers. But don't worry, ever since his death, his fans have been sending plenty of tributes to him, which will hopefully help with his mother's hospital bills. Though to be honest, She probably doesn't care that much anymore about the money. 7. Over the edge. A Russian couple were recently caught on camera taking a domestic dispute to a new low. A guy walking down the street saw a heated argument unfolding on a balcony overlooking the sidewalk. Naturally, he pulled out his phone and began to film the argument as it got louder and more violent. The couple are yelling, they're starting to shove one another, and then from out of nowhere they're falling. The couple plunged 25 feet, 7.6 meters after teetering off the railing of their balcony. The passerby managed to catch the whole thing on video as the couple smacked onto the concrete. The bizarre fight happened in St. Petersburg, and both Olga Volkova and Yevgeny Karlijin suffered broken limbs from their fall. Apparently, the railing couldn't sustain their weight as they struggled together against it. This caused the railing to break, for the couple to fall, and for the passerby to get some great unexpected footage for his stream. Sometimes the most interesting streams happen totally by accident. Hopefully next time, the disastrous couple will keep their arguing inside, out of the view of the public, and away from any dangerous ledges. 6. Cat filter everywhere. The cat filter is causing some serious problems all across the world with people who don't quite understand how to live stream. One of the most hilarious examples just happened a few weeks ago when the Canadian police had to apologize for technical difficulties that resulted in an absolutely bizarre news conference. The conference was about a double murder, something that doesn't need any added comedy. They were live streaming the conference on Facebook, and somebody had accidentally applied the cat filter. So while Sergeant Janelle Choyette of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police discussed a grisly double murder, she happened to have a cartoon cat ears and whiskers. The murder itself involved an American woman and her boyfriend from Australia who were killed in a fatal shootout on a remote stretch of highway in the province of British Columbia. Naturally, the families of those involved weren't too impressed with the cat whiskers. But what's your favorite cat filter blunder? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. 5. The Cleveland Killer. Back in April of 2017, there was a nationwide manhunt for a man who shot somebody to death while filming the murder on Facebook Live. The suspect was Steve Stevens, who said in a disturbing follow-up video to the murder that he had already killed 13 people and was in the middle of a killing spree. He said he would murder many more. The poor victim was Robert Godwin, 74 years old. Robert was walking home from having Easter lunch on a peaceful Sunday afternoon when Steve targeted him at random and streamed it all live as he shot the man to death. What really disturbed people at the time, unsurprisingly, wasn't actually the death of the old man, but the fact that Facebook allowed the video to stay on its site for hours. Millions of people watched the brutal killing before Facebook finally realized what was happening and took the video down. The first complaint apparently came in 2 hours after, but it was even longer before the video was removed. It was also quite a while before the police figured out what was going on and issued a photograph of Steve Stevens and put out an arrest warrant. The manhunt did eventually catch Steve after he was spotted in Pennsylvania. Out of all the places he could have gone, he drove his car into a McDonald's drive-thru, where somebody recognized him and called the cops. 4. Cooking show catastrophe. In Thailand, an internet celebrity had the worst live stream cooking show in history. She didn't mess up the recipe or accidentally cook herself in a giant bowl of soup. Instead, she simply fell to the ground and died while cooking for her online fans. Those who were watching her live stream were positively shocked. The celebrity Pai Ping was just getting started with her daily video. She had her pink apron on. She was all set to show her viewers how to cook some yummy food, and she was smiling and seemed totally happy. But then, totally out of nowhere, she slipped and fell forward, hit the floor, and died. Nobody knew what happened at the time of the sting. Peng's husband rushed to her rescue and turned off the camera. It wasn't until much later that one of Peng's relatives logged onto her account and revealed the disturbing news of her death. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered heart failure from the sudden onset of heart disease. Nobody even knew that she was sick, as she had never been diagnosed with any kind of disease. It must have come on fast, been subtle enough that she never realized she was sick, and then that was it. Before she could even complete her cooking show, her heart gave out in front of her terrified fans. 3. Machete-wielding robbers. In the United Kingdom, a high-speed chase was filmed from the perspectives of a trio of machete-wielding robbers as they tried to get away from the police. This unbelievable group actually streamed themselves live in the car as they tried to escape the authorities. It happened in Cant after the three men robbed a guy at knife point. Well, more like at machete point, which is arguably worse. The robbers were Ifeong Nisa, Salah Ibrahim, and Shamil Ibrahim. One of the men pulled out the machete and told the victim to give him everything he had. The victim tried to run but was chased down, knocked to the ground, and then forced to hand over the huge amount of cash he had on him. It was about $20 American. Once they got the measly $20, they got into their car and sped away, but not before turning on the live stream. The car chase itself was incredibly dangerous. The trio sped through red lights, they drove directly toward oncoming vehicles, and they even went the wrong way through a roundabout. But despite their brave driving moves, the officers were able to stop the car before anybody got hurt. All three suspects were dragged out of the vehicle and arrested. All three were sentenced to spend several years in prison, between 2 and 4 years each. 2. Live stream vigilantes. In New York City, you can now make $200 a day as a live streaming vigilante. Let me explain how it works. If you rush to the scene of a murder, a fire, or even a traffic accident, and you pull out your phone when you get there and start filming, you could make a nice cash payday. At least that's the pitch from a new controversial neighborhood watch application. The developers of this app are sneakily hiring everyday New Yorkers to live stream crimes. The app is called Citizen, and it was created in an effort to encourage ordinary citizens to be more involved with public emergencies. So far, this bizarre live streaming app has raised at least $133 million, with many of their backers coming from Silicon Valley. The app is promising to give real-time safety alerts to people where they live and where they work. If you happen to be in the right place at the right time and you film something awful happening, you can live stream that video and get the cash. It's a weird way to turn everybody in New York City with a phone into a vigilante. One of the users, a guy who goes by the name Chris, spends his days bicycling around the Bronx while chasing emergencies. So far, he has streamed 1,600 crimes and accidents, earning himself quite a bit of cash. 1. Too young to joyride. A mom in Connecticut has gotten into some serious trouble after police caught her letting her 10-year-old son drive her car on public roads. How did she get caught? You guessed it. She streamed the bizarre event live on Facebook. Lisa Nussbaum, 38, from the town of Monroe, put her little kid behind the wheel of the car and then streamed it for all her friends to watch because she thought it was absolutely adorable. But it wasn't that adorable. The 10-year-old kid was hardly big enough to reach the pedals, he definitely didn't know how to drive, and he could have easily driven through a stop sign or run somebody over on the sidewalk. Don't worry, The mother did not get away with it. Lisa was charged with risk of injury and impairing morals of a minor. She wasn't sent to jail, but was instead released with a promise to appear and will probably just get a slap on the wrist. The moral of the story is that if you're going to let an infant drive your car, maybe don't stream it for the whole world to watch. Or then again, maybe don't do it at all.
Number 10. Shot down at Walmart. If you think you've seen some terrifying things at Walmart, wait till you hear about what a 31-year-old woman did in Louisiana. According to the police, Kayla Giles shot her estranged husband to death in a Walmart parking lot early on a Saturday morning. Her husband, Thomas Coote Jr., was supposed to be picking up the kids for a custody exchange when she pulled out a gun and shot him in the chest. And what better place to commit murder than at Walmart? The police were called immediately. First responders arrived on the scene, but Thomas was unable to be revived. The bullet punctured his chest and ripped his insides apart, and he bled to death. To make matters even more disturbing, all three of their children were present during the incident. This guy's wife shot him dead in front of their own kids. It's really the kids that lost in this situation, as all three had to be taken to the local police headquarters and then handed over to the Louisiana Department of Children and Family Services. Sadly, we don't know the motive for the killing. We do know that Thomas had previously filed a police complaint about his wife being dangerously violent. He had also tried to file a motion to prevent her from having custody of the kids. This is one of those rare cases where the mother probably should have had her kids taken away and full custody being given to the father. Now the mother is in jail and the father is dead. Number 9. A bad birthday. Penelope Jackson stabbed her husband 3 times on her birthday. It was almost like a long-awaited present that she got for herself. Her husband, David Jackson, was stabbed across the chest in the bedroom. He tried to flee, and then his wife stabbed him twice more in the kitchen while he was on the phone with the police. He had managed to ring the cops, who then listened as he screamed, and his wife plunged a knife into him over and over. As the police operator was still on the line listening to a literal murder, Penelope grabbed the phone and said, "He's in the kitchen, bleeding to death with any luck." Penelope then refused to give her husband any emergency aid and allowed him to bleed to death. When the police operator asked how many times she stabbed her husband, she said that she did it once. Then she said that her husband told her there was no way she'd stab him again, so she stabbed him twice more. During the court proceedings that followed, seeing as Penelope Jackson was undoubtedly guilty, Judge Martin Picton said that she did not show even a little bit of remorse for the attack. She was found guilty of murder. There wasn't really any debating what happened. Number 8. We can't all be perfect. A woman who got caught plotting her husband's murder has said in her defense, "We're not all perfect." She also said that the murder plot was a complete mistake, but there's nothing she can do about it now. Jamie Grachek already went through with having her husband killed and is currently locked up behind bars. The murder happened back in March of 2013 in Ohio. When authorities arrived on the scene of a reported shooting, they discovered John Grachek dying in his front yard, hit by bullets in his chest and thigh. The woman near him wasn't his wife, but his new girlfriend, Nicole Price. Before the shooting, John had been married to Jamie for 11 years. Things became too much when Jamie allegedly got tired of John acting violently when he got into a bad mood and taking his anger out on her. But according to John's daughter, Jamie was no saint either. She was using drugs, she refused to get a job, and she was neglectful to her children. But of course, Jamie has denied all of these accusations. The couple separated in 2012, and Jamie found herself under immense financial strain. She lost her electricity, the state removed her children, and she was so distraught that the only thing she could think to do was get revenge on her ex-husband. She ended up hiring a couple of thugs to rob and kill Jamie, which they succeeded in doing. She was charged with involuntary manslaughter, complicit to commit aggravated robbery, and was given 21 years in jail. The 2 men who actually did the killing received sentences of 18 to life and 15 to life. Number 7. The Alzheimer's scheme. A woman from Connecticut in her 60s convinced her husband that he was suffering from Alzheimer's. It was part of a diabolical scheme to steal his money. The scheme went on for about 20 years, according to New Haven police. The bad wife in this scenario is Donna Marino. She managed to steal approximately $600,000 from her husband, who is 10 years her senior. She cashed in his pension checks, his workers' compensation payments, and of course, his Social Security. She forged his signature on documents and checks that allowed her to deposit them into a secret bank account. And to cover her tracks, she convinced her husband that he was sick with Alzheimer's, so that he wouldn't go to the bank to discover how low his balance was on his accounts. It was honestly a smart, yet very evil scheme that paid off for 2 decades. She only got caught when the victim's adult daughter went to the police in 2019 to say that Donna had been robbing her father since 1999, and the whole time he had no idea. Donna has since been charged with first-degree larceny, though it's unclear if she'll actually do time in prison. Number 6. Too stingy. A housewife in Nigeria has been arrested after trying to have her husband kidnapped by a group of thugs. The reason behind the kidnapping was that the housewife felt her husband was too stingy with his cash. According to the police public relations officer in Ogun, where the event took place, 3 suspects were stopped because they looked suspicious. When the police searched these 3 men, they discovered weapons and rope, the tools very obviously needed for kidnapping. When they interrogated the suspects separately, all 3 gave different answers to the questions, confirming that something very serious was going on. In the end, the would-be kidnappers confessed that a woman had hired them to hide along the road and then ambush her husband. She was supposed to lure him into the area at a specific time. The men were supposed to tie him up with rope and demand a ransom. The 3 men gave up the identity of the woman. The police tracked her down, and she admitted to being the brains behind the whole operation. She claimed that kidnapping her husband and demanding a ransom was the only way that she would get any money out of him. He was too stingy and wouldn't buy her all the things that she wanted, so she resorted to kidnapping. Do you think you would ever resort to kidnapping your spouse to get what you want? Maybe you've even thought of it already. Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe for even more awesome videos from the channel. Number 5. Dissolved in chemicals. In India, a woman has been found guilty of murdering her husband. It's not the murder itself that's overtly disturbing, but what was done after to the man's body. Let's start at the beginning. The woman, named Radha, murdered her husband with the help of a man whom she was having an affair with. This kind of thing, whether we like it or not, happens all the time. But to get rid of the evidence, Radha took things to the extreme. She first dismembered her dead husband, then pulled a move straight from Walter White's book of body disposal. She tried to dissolve his remains in a tub of chemicals, but seeing as she wasn't a proper chemist, she didn't quite know how to do it properly. Messing around with the chemicals caused a massive explosion, which brought the police down on the place where she was trying to ditch the body. She had rented an apartment to do the disposal in private. When the police showed up, they found the woman and the man she was having an affair with, along with the horribly mangled corpse of the dead man. Number 4. The proposal. A realtor in India made his wife so angry that she bludgeoned him to death with an iron rod. According to what she said when surrendering to the police, she attacked her husband because he had proposed that she take part in a wife swap with one of his relatives. Naturally, she felt insulted. When she said no to the proposal, her husband then told her that she had no choice. She was going to participate in the wife swap whether she wanted to or not. What he hadn't expected was to be bashed in the head with an iron rod. No wife swap for him, not now and not ever. But just wait. This twisted tale of murder has a few more twists. The pair had been married for about 5 years and frequently argued over a property dispute. People close to the case have claimed she didn't murder her husband out of anger, but because she was trying to get rid of him so she could get her hands on his property. This probably isn't true though, considering the details surrounding the killing itself. She had waited until her husband fell asleep to do the crime. She crept into the room, stood above the bed where he was sleeping, and brought down the iron pipe on his skull. She kept hitting him until his head looked like a mashed watermelon. Immediately after, she called the police and told them what she did. For her, keeping her dignity and killing her husband was worth more than participating in his perverted fantasies. Number 3. Secret thievery. A woman has been sentenced to serve 18 months in prison after getting caught stealing over $900,000 from her husband and her husband's family. The man hasn't revealed his identity, as this is probably pretty embarrassing for him, but he has given reporters all the juicy details about his wife and the case. He says she was extremely organized and great at setting up things like appointments and coordinating support for his elderly mother. He naturally trusted his wife, and so it seemed like a good idea for her to keep track of his parents' finances as they got older. The problem was that instead of looking after their finances, she was stealing it. It became a massive issue when his mother realized something was wrong with her bank accounts. She discovered credit cards in her name that shouldn't have existed. And when the husband confronted his wife about the accusations, she ran out of the house like a common thief and never went back. The husband was forced to contact the authorities, who learned that she had embezzled almost $1 million. The husband, after getting this bombshell dropped on his head, then learned that his income taxes had never been filed, his mortgage hadn't been paid, and his wife had been stealing all that money instead with the intention of leaving him. Thankfully, you just can't get away with this kind of thing in this day and age. The police were easily able to track the fleeing wife down and arrest her. All the money she embezzled was taken away, and she was sent to jail for 1.5 years on charges of fraud. Number 2. A deadly rumor. The woman who killed her husband with boiling water has been sentenced to life in prison. Her name is Corrina Smith from England, and she killed her husband after hearing a rumor about him that she thought was true. It was July 14, 2020. The day before, Corrina had heard a rumor that her husband was a sexual predator who had a problem with abusing children, including the son they shared together. She was distressed beyond belief about the rumor, especially since their son had died way back in 2007. She began thinking that her husband had something to do with their child's death. She was so mad that she filled a bucket with boiling water and bags of sugar. As her husband lay in bed, she poured the boiling sugar water onto his arms and torso, and then ran away to a neighbor's house and called the police. When the police arrived, they found her husband Craig Baines in serious distress. The skin of his torso and arms was already peeling off, as the boiling sugar water, basically 300-degree syrup, stripped away his flesh. He went to the hospital, was marked in stable condition for 2 weeks, but ultimately passed away. Because of the cruel, painful, and barbaric way that Corrina killed her husband, she was charged with murder and given life. Only after 12 years of prison will she be eligible for parole. As for that rumor she heard, nobody has any idea if it's true. Now that Craig Baines is dead, it's hard for the police to prove any allegations against him. We'll never know if he really was a pervert or if he got burned for no reason. Number 1. Fake kidnapping. In yet another bizarre case of kidnapping, this one coming straight from Kenya, a woman has tried to extort her husband. But in this case, it's a little different. It involves the woman faking her own kidnapping to get money from her husband. The husband received a call from an unknown individual saying that they had his wife and that they needed a large ransom of cash. The husband quickly filed a missing persons report with the police and began trying to raise enough money to send to the kidnappers. He couldn't put it all together, but he got quite a bit and sent it over in hopes that they would let her go. Unbeknownst to everyone, the woman had eloped with a cab driver and was hoping to squeeze her husband for all he had before getting rid of him. But she didn't tell anyone else about the scheme, meaning that even her own relatives were gathering money for her release. The kidnappers, meaning the wife and her new boyfriend, ended up with even more cash than they had originally asked for. But like every half-baked scheme, this one came to a dramatic end. The police had been tracking the supposed kidnapping and weren't convinced it was real. They tracked the woman down and discovered her with a new boyfriend and all the cash they'd stolen from the duped husband and the woman's family. Suffice to say, she didn't get to keep any of the money.
Cant, a bad stunt. In Hawaii, it is illegal to jump off most volcanoes. Yet on the island of Kauai, a man jumped directly off the top of Walua Falls because he didn't think it looked that far down. He thought it would be a wild stunt he could easily pull off to impress his friends. In reality, the falls is much taller than it looks, at 200 feet, and the guy nearly died. His name is Shiloh Cheyenne. He had moved to Hawaii from California just about 2 years before the incident. Before he moved back to California, his local friends took him to Wailua Falls as part of his going-away celebration. When they got to the waterfall itself, Shiloh and his friends could see that the area was clearly fenced off. There were signs everywhere warning people to stay away from the edge. All the same, Shiloh said he was compelled to break the rules and jump off the edge. His friends even filmed his flight down, including the painful smack when he hit the water below. Ouch! According to what Shiloh said, he pointed his feet so that he didn't do a belly flop. But he had his head craned in such a way that when he hit the water, his head snapped back and he was knocked out cold. The only reason he survived was that a few tourists from the bottom swam out into the middle of the waterfall and pulled him back to shore. Amazingly, he only had a few torn muscles and wasn't even injured. 9. Teenage tragedy. In one of the worst waterfall disasters of all time, 20 high school students were killed while swimming at a waterfall in Ghana. But what makes this case really strange is that the students didn't all go over the edge of the falls and break their bodies at the bottom. Instead, they were killed by falling trees that were uprooted during a sudden storm. The students were swimming at Kintampo Waterfall, a popular area for picnickers in Ghana. Wind and heavy rain came out of nowhere, causing massive trees to tip over and literally land on the high school students who had been relaxing in the pool. The thing is that the students were at the bottom of the waterfall and the trees that were being uprooted were landing in the river above. The water from the river spilled over the waterfall, normally cooling off the locals. But because the trees had gotten tossed into the river, suddenly they came hurtling off the side of the waterfall like live bombs. Within a handful of seconds, 20 students had been crushed to death by trees falling over the falls. According to the head teacher and one of the witnesses of this terrifying tragedy, the students had actually gotten trapped by a wall of trees before they could ever escape. A few trees came down, the students realized what was happening and tried to get away, but so many trees were falling that it created a barricade. They were stuck in the pool like a bunch of spiders in a toilet bowl. There was nothing they could do as the trees came tumbling down on their heads, as if a beaver dam had broken right above them. In the end, 20 lives were lost. 8. The Final Adventure. A trio of friends who got famous on social media for traveling around the world and chronicling their experiences have met a rather unfortunate end. After traveling through some of the most dangerous countries in the world, they ended up having their final adventure in the relatively safe country of Canada. They died after an accident at Shannon Falls, just about 35 miles from Vancouver in British Columbia. The trio included Charles Riker Gamble, Alexei Yayak, and Megan Scrapper. They had hundreds of thousands of followers online. They were sponsored by brands that promote travel and adventurous lifestyles, and their corpses were found floating in a pool at the bottom of the waterfall. According to the Canadian authorities, all three of them fell about 100 feet to their deaths while they were swimming at the top of the waterfall. Their deaths, while extremely tragic, also brought up an issue about thrill-seeking for the sake of gaining likes and followers. In the aftermath of the accident, it came out that these people had pled guilty to charges related to poor behavior throughout several national parks in the U.S., and this is straight from the National Park Service. Nobody knows what the friends were doing at Shannon Falls, but they very well could have been up to no good. The Squamish Search and Rescue Team believed they were swimming when one of them got pulled by the current. The others tried to rescue them before they went over the falls, and then all three were dead. 7. The deadly Laurel Fork Falls. A teenager from Florida died after falling 80 feet down the Laurel Fork Falls in South Carolina. His horrifying death is made even more shocking because he was only 14 years old. He hadn't been trying to do anything wrong, he wasn't trying to take selfies, and he wasn't breaking any rules. He was simply hanging out at the top of the waterfall when he slipped on something wet, fell down, tumbled over the edge, and then cracked his brains open on the rocks below. According to the Pickens County coroner, he died at the scene from blunt force trauma. His name was Isaiah Oertel, and he was the second person to die at the Laurel Fork Falls in 2020. Before this, a woman named Taylor Coleman also slipped from the top of the falls and died when she hit the bottom. Only 30 miles from Greenville, Laurel Fork Falls seems to be one of the most dangerous recreational places in the whole state. But what do you think about Laurel Fork Falls? Have you ever visited this North Carolina death trap? And if you haven't, would you hike the waterfall here knowing people continuously slip and die at the top? Let us know in the comments, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Over the edge. In a truly tragic incident, a man from Utah died while hiking near the Bridal Veil Falls with his fiancée and her 9-year-old son. The woman and her child are perfectly okay, but 40-year-old Adrian Vanderklis is being put in a coffin. According to the Utah County Sheriff's Office, Adrian was hiking with a young boy when he slipped on some unstable material above the falls itself and fell down. He slipped and plummeted from an elevation of roughly 5,800 feet. But he didn't hit the bottom of the falls, instead landing on a vertical slope, a kind of jagged piece of rock sticking out of the sheer cliff. Search and rescue workers could only reach his body using a helicopter. They actually had to call the operation off because it got too dangerous with nightfall, finally rescuing his body the next day. As for his fiancée and her child, he had been walking alone with a boy when the accident happened. The child was left to climb back down the mountain by himself to get to where his mom was camped out. Luckily, this was a very brave 9-year-old. He made it to safety and was able to report what happened to Adrian. 5. Selfie Fail. A social media influencer from Hong Kong has been killed by her own insatiable desire for selfies. She was described by the New York Post as an Instagram star. Her name was Sophia Chung, and she was just 32 years old when she died. She and some friends went to the Ha Pak Lai Park early on a Saturday morning to do some climbing and take some adventurous photographs. When they reached the waterfall on Pineapple Mountain, Sophia knew that she had to take a photograph at the very edge. It didn't even seem that dangerous since the pool of water is only about 16 feet from the top of the waterfall. People fall over 200 feet and still survive, yet Sophia died from a fall less than 1/10 of that. The influencer's friends were able to call the emergency services and they quickly arrived, but she was pronounced dead upon her arrival to the hospital. Some say it was really just a matter of time considering some of the extremely risky photos that she took. Her specialty was capturing photos on the edges of cliffs, high up where a single misplaced step could spell disaster. She even photographed herself hanging from the edge of a cliff, holding on with nothing but her fingertips. For people like these, the truly shocking part is when they actually go on to live a full life. You can't just stand on the edge forever without ever expecting to fall off. 4. A quick slip. At a California waterfall, a mother slipped and had an accident. It happened at Lake Tahoe when Stephanie Williams was hiking with her girlfriend at Eagle Falls. This is close to Emerald Bay. Everything was fine until Stephanie lost her footing and tumbled over sideways. At the time of her fall, she was a mother to 2 teenage boys, 12 and 14. She was the core of her entire family, according to what her brother told ABC News. Her whole family is now in disarray with her loss. Her brother also told authorities that she wasn't trying to take a selfie at the time of her death. It was just a weird accident that could have happened to anyone. Still, the authorities at Lake Tahoe are warning people about getting too close to the edge of their waterfalls. Even if it doesn't seem dangerous, one loose rock can spell disaster. If you're too close to the edge when you trip, that's the end of your life. Eagle Falls is only about 80 feet high, but that's still high enough to kill. Stephanie hit the ground like a doll made from thin twigs and broke so bad there was nothing the doctors could do to save her. 3. A haunting photo. At Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, Roy George Renashi Dekenye was taking photos of his family. They were all taking photos together from the very edge of the falls. Sadly, when it was Roy's turn to take a picture, he stepped a little too close to the edge and fell right over. A woman screamed, there was abrupt panic, and Roy was gone. The only thing that remained of Roy was a terrifying photo from the very second right before he fell 350 feet to his doom. He got the picture he wanted, standing on the rocks at the biggest waterfall in the world in nothing but a pair of sandals. Those rocks he was standing on were extremely slippery though, and sandals aren't exactly the proper footwear for wandering astride a giant waterfall. According to rescuers with the Zimbabwe National Parks and Wildlife Authority, it was too misty and raining too much for them to search for Roy right away. They had to put off the rescue attempt for a little while, until the weather was better. When they finally did go looking for him, they found various parts of Roy scattered at the bottom of the gorge, wedged between rocks. It looked as if when he fell, his limbs got trapped on the rocks and tore away from the rest of his body. He was in such terrible shape that they couldn't even positively identify him, though they are certain that it was Roy whose body they found. 2. Hugged to death. Yosemite National Park is one of the most beautiful yet terrifying parks in all of the United States of America, especially considering how many people die in climbing accidents. But climbing isn't the only cause of death here. Not so long ago, Hormiz David, Nikos Yakum, and Ramina Badal fell from the top of Vernal Fall and died. According to the eyewitnesses who watched the victims go over the edge, 2 of them were holding on to each other in a final bear hug as they fell 317 feet to their deaths. How did 3 people manage to fall over at the same time? According to those same eyewitnesses, the 3 of them entered the water above the falls, located not more than 25 feet from its precipice. The witnesses were screaming, yelling at them to get out of the water, but it seemed like they just didn't quite understand. They had been seen earlier climbing over the barricade to take pictures at the edge of the waterfall. The witnesses had screamed at them to go back to the safe side of the barricade, which they did, but shortly later they hopped over the barricade again and made their way to a rock in the middle of the river to take photographs. The woman in the group slipped, her friend reached for her, his friend reached for him, and all 3 ended up in the water being swept over the edge of the falls. 1. The survivor. In Tennessee, a local woman named Kim Hembry miraculously survived a terrifying tumble down the face of a waterfall. She was enjoying a leisurely bicycle ride with her husband down a trail famous for its waterfalls. And like almost every other person we talked about today, she stopped to take a picture at the top of one of the waterfalls. At the time, it was dry. There wasn't even any water flowing down it. She started to take pictures while her husband tried to get her away from the edge. He felt that something could go wrong at any second. But sadly for her, she didn't listen and something did go wrong. Kim slipped off the edge and fell somewhere between 35 and 40 feet. Her husband shrieked, immediately called for help, and then made his way down the waterfall to where his wife laid, seemingly dead. But Kim wasn't dead. She was horribly injured, but still alive. She had a gash across her face, her right ankle was broken, her right leg was shattered, and her L5 vertebrae was fractured. In the end, she had to get a bone graft from the top of her leg to reconstruct a bone in her ankle. Plus, her nose had smashed all the way through her skull because she hit a fallen tree at the bottom of the waterfall. The swelling in her face was so bad because of this that doctors feared performing surgery would cause an infection that could spread to her brain. She did survive in the end, and although she isn't terribly disfigured, she'll have some pretty rough scars for the rest of her life. Would you dare get as close to a waterfall as any of these unfortunate people? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks a lot for watching. Remember to subscribe and keep up to date on all the best videos from the channel. See you next time. Bye.